Hello and welcome back to Courtside. I'm Andrew Cohen, and we have two new members, permanent members of the Courtside family, Mike Randall, Sam Posman. How you guys doing?
Good, man. Glad to be here.
Doing well. I'm excited.
All right. Why don't we start off talking a little NBA trade deadline? Pretty crazy deadline. Probably one of the best in recent memory.
Oh, yeah. It was for sure one of the best in recent memory.
I feel like we should start off with Harden for Simmons. That thing, it started off early in the week. I think you started to hear the rumors, and there was the playing with, Nets saying there's no conversations. Philly saying, yeah, it's going to happen. It felt like momentum was building, and it did finally happen. I don't know. What do you guys think about it?
I won't lie to you. I didn't actually think it was going to happen for a while until we got down to the last couple of days, and we had rumors kind of just flying left and right. I thought it made sense for Philly to wait till the offseason to see what they could get for Simmons, potentially sign and trade with Harden, or just sign Harden outright and move Simmons out of the conference if they were able to. But that being said, you have Joel Embiid. He's having an MVP season. You don't want to waste it. So it makes all the sense in the world that they would do it now, but I won't lie, I didn't see it coming right up until the last couple of days when it became pretty evident.
I think it represents something big in the NBA. The downfall of the King of Woj. The days leading up to it, he was pretty much fighting with Brian Windhorst about whether or not it was going to happen. Woj was wrong, and then by the end of the day, he had lost to Shams in terms of stories broken. So I think we've witnessed the end of an era. Whether or not we're willing to accept it or not is one thing, but I think it's significant for that reason.
That's a unique perspective, man.
What did you think of the trade, though, Sam? Who do you think came out on top here?
I think Brooklyn wins this one. I think both teams actually lose. I'm going to be honest.
Really?
Okay.
I think
All
both.
right.
I think both teams lose. Brooklyn lost by less. Would be my mindset. The reason for that is with Philly, they've lost all their depth, right? And obviously, we know depth doesn't matter when you come to the playoffs because everyone just goes into an 8-man rotation. But I don't think they have 8 guys that can play in the playoffs anymore. I think Harden's already, unless in a week from now we're going to be like best pitcher or best actor goes to James Harden. I think he's already becoming somewhat of a shell of himself, especially with the new foul rules. He's definitely struggled to score as of recent, and I think Embiid really liked playing with Seth Curry, and I think he's going to feel that loss more than we're giving him credit for. As for Brooklyn, they now have 2 of the biggest head cases in the NBA on one team, led by a coach that has proven that defense does not matter, and they are now structured around a center named the Big Penguin, which technically is an upgrade from Blake Griffin, but is not an upgrade from Bruce Brown as their small ball 5.
Big Penguin, for those wondering, is Skip Bayless's nickname for Andre Drummond, because he has the mobility and athleticism of the most unathletic of penguins. But Andrew, what do you think? I got a lot to say about what Sam just went off with, but I'll let you start.
The Woj part or the actual basketball
The actual
part?
basketball part.
I mean,
care less about Woj.
I think for the Sixers, I don't think anyone looked at them as a true legitimate title threat before this trade, and you add in a second star like Harden, regardless of if he's fallen off from what he was, he's still one of the best players in the league. And now you have him with Embiid, and you figure it out around them. You still have Tyrese Maxey. You can kind of shift him into a bit more of a shooter role, like with Seth Curry. You still have Danny Green.
Tobias Harris. Very
yeah.
team-friendly contract there.
No, but, I mean, on the floor, he's a good
play.
basketball player, right? And you just figure it out from there. I mean, that's what you need. And then for Brooklyn, who knows if Harden would have played the rest of the year. Simmons, I mean, he hasn't played basketball in a while, obviously. I would imagine he's going to come back and be what he was for Philly. They traded Harden for him, so Harden was their distributor now. I would imagine that Simmons. I do think Drummond is a sneaky big pickup because they've really struggled to find a big man that can play consistent minutes.
Mm-hmm.
They've really struggled. I mean, they've had Blake Griffin, small ball 5, Nick Claxton. I think Drummond has more of an impact. But overall, I look at Philly now and say they're a legit title threat, was before I didn't. I think Brooklyn's more legit, but, I mean, they had the big 3, so they were. So I think in the short term, I think Philly wins in the short term, but long term, I think Brooklyn wins out.
I mean, because Philly really is a year and a half now.
It is.
They do. They have a window, but it's not a long window.
Now, their issue is they're going to have to sign him to a long window if they want to do anything past this year.
Yeah.
Most likely. He did opt in to his player option for next season at $47 million. So they have him under team control for one more year, but if they don't extend him, you're right, he can walk. I've thought a lot about this. I think Brooklyn wins this trade. Now, I'll preface that by saying I wouldn't consider the Sixers losers. I understand why they made the deal. Again, you have to maximize Joel Embiid, James Harden. If he's right, and Sam brings up a good point, we do not know if he's right. He has not been right now for about a year and a half. But if he's right, is one of the most dynamic league guards we've ever seen in terms of his ability to produce offense. So it's understandable that they would make the trade. I think Brooklyn ends up the winner for a couple of reasons. I think Simmons fits well next to Kevin Durant. Obviously, we don't know what the deal with Kyrie Irving is. But Simmons upgrades your entire defense immediately, which you need in the East, especially against bigger players. The Drummond pickup is just a big body. He'll eat space. He'll eat a few rebounds for a little bit. But Seth Curry is another shooter, especially with we don't know the status of Joe Harris. We know what a disaster he was in the playoffs, but we don't even know if he's coming back this year. So you add him, you add Simmons, who, like you guys mentioned, can take up some of the playmaking responsibilities. Kevin Durant showed the ability to do that in the playoffs last year as well. He had a couple triple doubles late in that Bucks series. And then the I don't know. I like your point, Sam, about the Sixers' depth. And then Harden has come up short in the playoffs. We don't know how he's going to click with Embiid. He's never really worked well with another superstar, maybe beside Chris Paul, but that went south quickly. So I think there's a lot more risk with Philly. I agree with you, Andrew, that it at least puts them in the title picture if things click. Now, whether or not they click, we don't know. I think for Brooklyn, they get deeper. They bring back a talented enough piece that it's not lopsided in terms of who gets the star player. And now, and this is big for me at least, you have someone to throw at Giannis. To get to the finals in the East, you're going to have to go through Milwaukee or maybe Philly now. And although you don't have a Giannis stopper because there's no such thing, you don't have a Joel Embiid stopper because there's no such thing, you have a versatile body you can throw at them, you can switch. And yeah, I think Brooklyn made out as well as they could considering the position Harden put them in, so I would consider them a winner.
See, I would also look at Philly, though, and they had Simmons, and I think they messed up by not trading him last offseason. I think it was such a big risk to come into the year and just hope. I mean, it took a superstar wanting out again for that deal to even be on the table. Mm-hmm. And so I think for them to be able to turn a really bad situation to at least a year and a half of James Harden, I think is really good. Now, if they were to trade Simmons for whether it was like CJ McCollum or someone like that, they're getting more assets back. They're not giving up draft picks. They're not giving up Seth Curry. So you could argue they could build a better overall team. I think what they have to hope is they can develop their other guys enough to the point where you have those two superstars, and that's going to carry you far enough, and you find 4 or 5 other role players that can play well.
The buyout market here could also get interesting, right? So Philly, like Sam, you said, they really probably go 6 deep right now, but you now have 2 superstar players. You have a team that's in contention. There's at least a possibility of picking up a couple players off the buyout market if they were able to get deals to work. And I don't know, if they were able to do that, that could alter the outlook for this year at least.
I mean, they have the rare combination of they have enough talent to go deep in the playoffs, and they have an opportunity for guys to play. Right? Mm-hmm. Outside of like strictly point guard, outside of strictly center, you can go to Philly and you're probably going to have a guaranteed role as long as you play relatively well.
Yeah.
One thing that concerns me with them is the history in that organization. And by organization, I mean the current predominant figures there, not necessarily the Sixers as a history, of just sucking when it matters. Right? We've got Doc Rivers, who has lost more Game 7s than anyone in NBA history. We've got Harden, where outside of the 2012 Oklahoma City season, has he ever really done anything in the playoffs? Besides have one of the best losses ever to the Warriors a couple of years back.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
I mean, that concerns me. Daryl Morey is always the I almost got there guy. They have no finishers, I think, and obviously Ben Simmons was the opposite of that, and I guess Harden is technically a step up, but in terms of proven success, it scares me a little bit.
I think that's fair. But also, if you're in their shoes, I mean, what are you going to do? Fire Doc Rivers and trade Embiid just to get someone who's more proven winner? I mean, obviously that's taking it a little bit too far, but I think for them, they turned a bad situation to a better situation. And regardless of how, I mean, that's definitely a knock I've used on James Harden in the past when he went to Brooklyn. I felt like him and Kyrie, that's something waiting to happen there. But
it happened.
And it did happen. But if you're Philly, you just say, listen, in basketball it comes down to talent so much in terms of just who's the best guy on the floor in a series.
Mm-hmm.
And they have two guys who in almost any given series you can make the argument is the best player on the floor. If you came out of that series and said Joel Embiid played better than anyone else or James Harden played anyone else, you would not be surprised. So
yeah. I agree with that, Andrew. That's why I tried to preface my comments a little bit. I know I droned on about the Nets with that. I wouldn't consider it a loss for the 76ers, more so a win for Brooklyn. I think the Sixers made out as well as they possibly could given the situation, unless they were going to get probably Damian Lillard away from Portland, which they were not. There was not a better wing or guard option on the market in the league. They were in a really bad position because of Simmons. And it at least, like you said, it puts them in the position where, hey, if you get the best player in the trade, NBA history shows most of the time you win the trade. Now, I think Simmons potentially closes that gap enough that the difference in depth traded here is significant. But, I mean, of course, the last time we saw the guy play basketball was one of the most embarrassing displays of, aggression. It was just a complete breakdown on the basketball court against an inferior opponent. So, I think 76ers definitely did as well as they could, but I think Brooklyn comes away the better team in terms of fit and versatility.
I completely agree about how usually the team that acquires the best player wins the trade, except for, and allow me to pivot here, I think the Haliburton Sabonis trade is an exception to that rule.
I'm torn on this trade. So, NBA Twitter obviously goes nuts. How can you trade Haliburton? Now, granted, he's a young guard shooting 40% from three, giving you 7.5 assists a game. But I understand the Sacramento perspective of we have two guards, both more so lead guards than play off of each other. The reason why Steph and Clay work so well is because Clay doesn't need to touch the basketball. Halliburton, to get those 7.5 assists, needs to be running pick and roll action, needs to be orchestrating offense. Fox can't shoot, so he's not going to go sit on the wing and slash and shoot. So I understand their perspective, especially if it comes down to an owner telling you need to win now, that you would want to split up two guards who are both defensive liabilities and potentially don't play off each other fantastically. Granted, I have not watched very many Sacramento Kings games this year, so I can't directly speak to that. I don't think it's as crazy as people are making out to be. Now, I think another good debate here is, do you pick Fox or Haliburton, given the situation and the money? But I understand the perspective of deciding to split those two up to try to get more versatile in the front court. So I want to know what you guys think about that. But I think the reaction to trading Haliburton was a little strong considering the situation Sacramento was in.
I think a part that's kind of gone under the radar is that this is Haliburton's second season. I mean, they probably have 7 years at least guaranteed where he's on that roster versus now you have Sabonis, I think, for 2.5. Mm-hmm. Now, he's not making a ton of money. He makes, I think, under $20 million, which is really good considering how well he's been playing the past couple years. But I do think the fact that you have Haliburton for that long and you trade him this early when you know he's going to be good, I think that's a tough pill to swallow. I think all reports that ownership wanted them to make a playoff run this year, and I think that's short-sighted. I think it's not a guarantee that getting Sabonis gets you there. When you trade away not only Haliburton, you trade away Buddy Hield too, who can. I mean, he's a good scorer. He has his moments where he shoots the lights out of the ball, and they're pretty far out of it too, right? I mean, they're several games back, even just the 10 seed, to make the play-in. So, I think this is a clear example of just ownership trying to meddle and trying to get back into the playoffs. Because if you're looking at rebuilding the Kings, Haliburton has to be a pillar. He's there for years. And, I mean, the Haliburton-Fox conversation is interesting. I think in this case, the question is, was Sabonis worth splitting them up right now versus waiting and trying to figure that out a little bit more?
I don't understand how you can say you need to win now and then say that De'Aaron Fox is going to contribute to you getting wins. Like, that just seems completely untenable to me. How many examples do we have of players immediately coming into the NBA and just being really good, solid point guards? There are very few examples of that. There are very few good, solid point guards in the league right now. Even LaMelo last year, everyone says he would check all those boxes, but he didn't play defense. Tyrese Haliburton checks every single box you want. He's like 47% off the dribble from three. He like you said, 7 assisted game. He's 21. He's not just a young point guard. He's 21. That's 2 or 3 years younger than Tatum, or 2 years older. Depends who you ask. I don't understand how you would also need to trade, that you would have to partner Buddy Hield with him to move him. I would expect Buddy to have to be partnered with Fox if you were to trade him for Sabonis. But to match Sabonis, I don't understand how Haliburton alone doesn't do that. Unless the Kings were just desperate. And that seems to be the situation because they all want to keep their jobs.
I think Andrew said it. This is a perfect example of ownership meddling. And the point you made about... The point I was making about breaking the guards up, in my mind, is relating a little bit to the Dame and CJ situation, which, for most NBA teams, was quite successful. But ultimately...
Kings would love to be them.
Yeah, the Kings would love to be in Portland's position. But ultimately, they couldn't get over the hump. Now, Andrew, your point, I think, is a good one in that this is not that situation. And I may have been a little short-sighted in kind of making that mental comparison in that you have years of development and left in Haliburton. They have not had 9 years where you haven't met whatever the expectation is. In Portland, it was a title, and Sacramento would be the playoffs. So it's not like they've missed the playoffs together for 5 years straight, and all of a sudden you got to break the pair up. I think long term that might have ended up being the outcome, given the defensive shortcomings of those two, and just the nasty nature of the West. So maybe you get ahead of it here a little bit, but I think you guys are right. I think anytime you trade a young up-and-coming point guard in a point guard-driven league, it's a tough pill to swallow. That being said, I don't think it's the Armageddon that Kings fans made it out to be, but I can understand where the disappointment will come from.
Speaking of point guards, do we want to talk about the new and improved Boston Celtics?
Yeah.
We have to, yeah, sure.
I think they're a really interesting team because they, for a year plus, about a year and a half, were just 500, just incredibly mediocre. And they have this hot streak in the last month where defensively they're just incredible compared to if you look at like defensive efficiency, they are so far and above the next team. It's ridiculous. And Derek White fits right in. And all they had to get, if you just look at it on the floor, Romeo Langford does not really play. Josh Richardson, I think they're selling high. Right? He's shooting 40% from three this year, and that's like the big number everyone's using. But if you go back to last year, he did not shoot that well. If you go back to the year before, he did not shoot that well. I don't think on the offensive end he's some sort of dynamic playmaker. He can make plays with the ball. He's not terrible at it. Mm-hmm. It's not his primary skill, I don't think. And so on the floor, I would much rather have Derek White than Josh Richardson and Dennis Schroeder. I think the second guess in this trade is the draft pick compensation. And giving up a first-round pick, I think it says a lot about the Celtics that after years of Danny Ainge hoarding draft picks and just taking all those guys, Brad Stevens trades the first-round pick back-to-back years. I think that says something interesting. We can talk about that maybe. And then there's the 2028 pick swap, which a lot of people are up in arms about. It's only top one protected. And I think the argument is you shouldn't do that for Derek White. I look at it as Derek White's under contract for 3.5 years. He fits in really well. He and Marcus Smart are very similar players. You could trade one of them in the offseason and be like, oh, you still have another point guard or combo guard that can play defense and is pretty big. I like the trade. I don't necessarily think it's like this big home run, but I do like the trade. And I think an underrated part is Josh Richardson's 3-point percentage going up because he's getting better looks in Boston than he was at Dallas or wherever. I think the same thing could apply to Derek White. Not that he's going to turn into a 40% shooter, but back to like 35%, which is what he usually shoots, I think is very possible.
I don't buy the whole 2028 first-round pick swap anger.
Yeah.
I'm never
2028.
Yeah, it's a 16-year-old. No one really cares. If you think about it from the Celtics timeline anyway, Tatum and Brown are going to be in their prime by that time. So if a rookie is making the difference in terms of like a finals run, then we're in a bad spot in the first place.
And if they're not here, we're screwed either way.
Exactly. So if the 2028 pick matters in the end, that is a bad omen for the Celtics. And it's not the fault of this trade. It's the fault of what they've done in the time between this trade and 2028.
Yeah.
In terms of the whole trade in its entirety, I think the Celtics actually having two, and I say this generously to Marcus, two passable point guards on the floor at the same time is a rare, rare commodity. Because Romeo and Pritch, as much as I love them, and new number Romeo, I think this is quite the upgrade from that.
I don't know, man. There's some nasty 16-year-olds if you go out and look at high school basketball right now.
The Georgia running back.
Oh, my God, yeah. I agree with you guys. I think it was a good move by Boston. I don't have a ton to say about it because I don't know how much it moves the needle for them. I think, honestly, they're one of the teams that comes out a loser in the Simmons-Brooklyn trade.
Yeah.
Because now both teams are better.
Yeah, we'll talk about that for sure.
So we have this Boston team that seems to be ascending, and then two teams that you kind of like, depending on maybe the injuries and where the games are being played, if you're playing Brooklyn, maybe they could make things interesting in the playoffs. Now it's like, I don't know. If they run into that Nets team or Sixers team in the second round, they're probably going home. If they run into Milwaukee, we know that's not going to end well. So I think it was a good move. I think as Tatum and Brown develop and improve going forward, which I think we all expect considering their youth, how long is White under team control for?
3.5 more years.
Yeah, 3 years after this one.
Okay, so there you go. So it might end up paying dividends down the line. I think it'll help them stay out of the play-in tournament this year, potentially have a competitive series or two in the playoffs, and then go home in the first or second round, depending on matchups. But again, I think it's a good move. I just don't think it's a size. It's not a seismic changer. You're not going to get that with the Derek White move. But for where this franchise has been, I think it's certainly you got what you could.
I also look at just the end of the Danny Ainge era. Basically, after the Isaiah Thomas trade, no trade deadline deals up until last year where they traded for Fournier and they traded Tice.
No one really
and that's, of course, they brought Tice back. Brad Stevens loves himself some Daniel Tice. But
Tice,
to just see no aggression from the team for years and then to finally have it this year and then to have people get upset because they gave up draft picks, which is what being aggressive is. They didn't give up an actual player. They gave up a draft. Like, if in 2014 you said, oh, they're giving up a 2021 draft pick, and that turns out to be, end of the lottery, who cares? It's an end of the lottery draft pick. Those don't pan out. For the Celtics, Romeo Langford hasn't panned out. Nesmith hasn't played enough to know if he's panned out.
Hey, we're holding on to hope.
I know we're holding on to hope, but right now you're not like, oh, slam dunk home run. We need that guy.
Grant Williams is the closest thing to panning out outside of a top 5 pick.
And he's a passable NBA role player.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so I like the aggressiveness. I like that they're looking at Tatum and Brown and they're saying they're under and with the current way the league works, where superstars will ask out after a few years. They're looking at those two and saying, we have them under contract. We have a window. And you can't just be like, well, let's keep our 2028 draft pick because we want to be relevant in 4 years. You don't know if you're going to be relevant in 4 years.
You don't want to be the Lakers where you're trying to tear yourself between two eras.
Exactly. And if Derek White works out, you have him for several years. And you hope that you hope he resigns. I mean, he's nearing his prime. What is the prime for Derek White? I mean, hopefully just a starting point guard in the NBA. Mm-hmm. And the team desperately needs playmaking. And he's a good playmaker. Not a great shooter, although he shoots 48% from the corners, so you hope he gets some looks from there. I just like the aggressiveness in looking at the team and saying, we have Tatum and Brown, and that should be good enough to compete in the Eastern Conference, and let's just get better players around. Because Derek White's a better player than Josh Richardson. He's better than Dennis Schroeder. And if Josh Richardson was shooting 36% from the field this year, from 3, which is good, no one would be saying anything about losing Josh Richardson. As much as I liked him as a nice role player on this team, Derek White's a better player.
That's an excellent point, Andrew, and it's a criticism I've had of Boston, and particularly Ainge, for a while, in that in today's NBA, you work in 2 to 3 year windows, and that's long-term windows. A lot of teams are working year to year. We'll talk about the Lakers in a little bit, but they have gone year to year to year, and now they are running up against the bill. The Celtics hit on a couple young stars early, obviously with these 2 wings. They thought they had Kyrie Irving at a point when he was only about 26 years old, right? That obviously doesn't pan out. It's not their fault. But they have had this history, especially with Ainge, of pushing it down the line. We got to let the young guys develop, or we have the future. No, if you have 2 elite all-NBA caliber wings, you go to win now, and then you reshuffle the deck every 2 to 3 years if it's not working out. But you build to win, and you just keep it rolling. LeBron James has made a career out of, albeit bouncing around, but taking 3 to 4 year projects, winning a title, and moving on, figuring something else out. There's none of this, hey, we're going to put these 2 youngsters together, we're going to hoard draft picks, hopefully a couple guys pan out, and we'll be good in 7 years. Who the hell knows what happens in 7 years? 2028? Tatum might not have a knee by the time we get there, and the whole plan goes to shit, right? So I think the new aggressiveness for the organization is big, and that's a good takeaway. To not only is it a good move on the court, but you're right, it shows a new willingness to be aggressive and to try to win now with Tatum and Brown, which I agree with. I don't think it's going to work out this year, but it's good to see.
You mentioned the Lakers. Are they the biggest losers at the trade deadline? Because they are a mess right now, and they did absolutely nothing.
You can't go anywhere else. I mean, I think we discussed the Knicks as potential losers for sure, but the Knicks ceiling into the season was what, you maybe make it to the second round this year. And that's probably being generous with what the East shaped up to be.
The Knicks are only going to be as good as Julius Randle's right hand,
which is never going to be very good. I think the Lakers are catastrophic losers from the trade deadline. They're catastrophic losers from the entire last calendar year of basketball, right? You go into the playoffs last year, Anthony Davis and LeBron James are hurt, Dennis Schroeder goes AWOL out of nowhere, and you lose to the Suns, who end up going to the finals, but a very disappointing end for LeBron James' team to go in the first round. You go into the offseason, you have Buddy Hield and or DeMar DeRozan basically ready to walk through the door for you, and LeBron and Anthony Davis, LeBron, God bless him, is not the GM he thinks he is. They go to Pelinka and they're like, hey man, we want Russ. We'll make it work. Now, I have a theory about LeBron's mindset there that maybe we'll get into today or we'll get into another time, but regardless of his intentions, it's been an absolute disaster. I've never seen a superstar just crumble on himself the way Russ has, maybe since Simmons in the playoffs last year. But that was only over a 4-game stretch. This is 55 games of just pitiful basketball. Now, you back yourself into a corner because of the deal Russ is on. You could really only trade him for John Wall or numerous other players if some team was stupid enough to do it.
Bertans.
So, I mean, there were things floated around about the Knicks, potentially, Kemba, Fournier in the move, the Knicks trying to get a big name into the Garden to sell tickets. I actually didn't hate that idea for both teams. I think Russ is better when he's on a lower caliber team with lower expectations, and his job is to play with energy, get people in the door, be entertaining. But aside from that, aside from John Wall, and I know Houston wanted to add a 2027 first-round pick, so they wanted some 13-year-old, but LA wasn't willing to do it. You back yourself in the corner with Russ. And then the other issue is you picked Taylor Horton-Tucker over Alex Caruso. That has screwed you. He is a disaster of a basketball player. Kendrick Nunn was likely to be more of an asset, but he hasn't played, so we don't know. It's hard to go to teams with a Jeremy Grant and sell Taylor Horton-Tucker, right? Yeah. You bet on him, you missed. He's your only movable salary. Obviously, that's going to play into a lot is the cap stuff. The only mid-tier salary you have is Tucker. So, literally, the assets they went into the trade deadline with were arguably the worst contract in the NBA. Taylor Horton-Tucker, Kendrick Nunn, and a first-round pick in 5 years. So, I'm not surprised they didn't get anything done, but for a team that came into the season expecting to be a title contender, They are falling laughably short of it. They were not able to make moves, and then I saw a report today that they were not unified in this decision. LeBron and Anthony Davis went to Pelinka, pushed hard for trades to be made. Players within the organization, potentially those two, potentially others, felt like it wasn't working out and players needed to be moved. It didn't happen. So now you go into this mess of a situation where Russell Westbrook is complaining left and right, being passive-aggressive about getting benched. Half the team probably thinks the other half of the team should have been traded. LeBron probably hates everybody. Anthony Davis is soft as puppy stuff. And there's just, it's a disaster. And as a LeBron James fan, and I'll admit to it on episode 1, that's where my allegiance lies in the NBA. It's the worst one of his teams has underperformed or managed to salvage itself. There's no salvaging this team. I think either you do a John Wall with Russ and you sit him down and LeBron and Anthony Davis squeak you into the play-in, or you look at a catastrophic finish to the season. But that's my unemotional and unapologetic rant on the disaster the Lakers were at the deadline and all season. So I don't know if you guys have anything to add.
I think it'd be disrespectful to add anything.
I feel like after the trade deadline, I want to look at both conferences and kind of pick out who are the favorites now that the deadline is passed. I think in the West, I mean, the Warriors didn't do anything. The Jazz traded away Joe Ingles, but there wasn't really anything substantial there. Yeah,
so
see, it was
free Joe Ingles.
We know what the Jazz represent come playoff time.
Yeah, there are some behind-the-scenes reports about them that their locker room is not good right now.
Rudy and Spida getting into it again.
But I mean, you have the Grizzlies; they didn't do anything.
They shouldn't have done anything.
And they shouldn't have done anything. But I think you look at the teams there and you say there was an opportunity to make ground. If you're a team in the bottom half of the West, Western Conference playoff picture, and you make a move,
Pelicans.
I mean, the Pelicans. You hope you get Zion back, and not
had a good player in McCollum.
Yeah, not that you're necessarily going to go into Golden State and beat them in a 7-game series, but you can at least make it more competitive and build something. You know, you never know what's going to happen. I mean, last year, injuries all over the place. You never know what's going to happen. I don't know what your thoughts are on the West right now.
I definitely trust Golden State the most out of the West. I know Phoenix is having a great unprecedented season, but Chris Paul doesn't win when it matters. DeAndre Ayton lost his manhood to Giannis a few months ago, and Devin Booker is only as good as his shooting allows him to be. I know Monty Williams is a great coach. I love the pieces they have around them. Cam Johnson's my guy, but I don't trust them to win come playoff time. Golden State, on the other hand, they know each other like the back of their hands. I mean, the resume speaks for itself. I don't have to get into it. They might have Wiseman back. Kuminga's just a wild card that no one knows what they're going to get every night, which I think kind of works when you're not relying on that type of guy. Kind of like what Anunoby did to the Celtics in the bubble.
A little better. Nobody's a little better, but
yeah. But I think Golden State just has all the pieces, and I think they know that their window, at least with Draymond, is shrinking. He's adapted his game really well into his old age. He does love his wine with LeBron, so I think that's part of it. But I feel I would be foolish to bet against them.
I think in the East, before the trade deadline, I would have said Milwaukee and Miami are the favorites. Not guaranteed to get out because I don't think it's a huge drop-off, but I think they were at the top tier. I think with the Philly-Brooklyn trade, I think both those teams become significantly more threatening to make the finals. And then you have your tier of the Celtics, the Bulls, teams like that who are good. I mean, the Celtics have kind of turned around. The Bulls have been great all year, despite injuries. I think the problem with the Bulls is right now you don't know if you go into a series, I think most other teams are paying at least 1 to 2 guys that are better than any of the best players on the Bulls. I think the Celtics are a flaw. Right, you get into teams that have some sort of flaw. But I think the Brooklyn-Philly trade elevates them both. And I think it's a big change to the East because a week ago, I would have said there's probably 7 or 8 teams that it's not out of the realm of possibility they get there. I think now I could confidently say 4 or 5.
Yeah, I agree. Going back to the West real quick, I think it's a 2-horse race, honestly, at this point. I will never trust Utah in a playoff series again. Denver is interesting. I just saw a report today that Murray and MPJ are expected back sooner rather than later, whatever that means. Fully healthy and clicking, that team has as much talent as anybody. Jokic kept them afloat in the meantime with those. Those are pretty significant injuries. Those are two high-level performers. That being said, when it comes down to it, when it's nut crunching time in the playoffs, give me Steph, give me CP3 despite some of his shortcomings. I think it ends up coming down to Golden State and Phoenix. I would go with you, Sam, in that I just trust Golden State more, despite the fact that that pains me to say. But I don't think Phoenix draws dead in that matchup at all. To the extent you can throw bodies at Steph, and Steph is by no means playing well. If he keeps it up like this, Phoenix will get through them. He's got to pick it back up. Klay, granted, he's getting the pass as he should for the injuries, has not been Klay Thompson. So the Splash Brothers are more name than production at this point in time. I'm not saying that will continue. I am picking them to come out. But they need to step up the play because Phoenix is cooking. And Phoenix wins with defense, smart basketball, and situationally they are going to be phenomenal because they have Chris Paul. Granted, he's had his history of coming undone in the playoffs a little bit. That would worry me. But in recent years, he's, I would say, improved on that. You have the Houston teams that should have beat Golden State if he stays healthy. He falls apart a little bit in the finals last year, but try not falling apart when you have Jrue Holiday picking up full court for 6 games.
It's fair.
Steph would wear down too. Steph wore down freaking Matthew Dellavedova. So I think there's an element to this where I think that's a hell of a 6 or a hell of a 7-game series, probably 7. So I'm going to go Golden State because of, Sam, what you said, because of the championship pedigree. Drake, just if you need to execute down the stretch, Klay, Steph, and Draymond are just 3 guys who have been there, done that. Phoenix now has more experience, but you don't trust them quite as much. But I think it's interesting. The West is weird this year. The West really feels like the two-horse race, like I mentioned. The only other live dog I really see is maybe Memphis. They almost have a Bengals feel. They don't know what they don't know, right? Like, Ja Morant is playing with as much confidence as anyone on the planet right now. They're talented. They win with defense. I think teams that win with defense and win situationally win in the playoffs. They do both of those well. They're young. They're athletic. He's hungry as hell. So they could put the scare in either of those teams. Maybe they get one of them out early. I don't see them beating both potentially to get to the finals. But you never know. And then out east, Andrew, you said it. I think the Nets-Philly trade elevates both teams. Although I will say the Nets need to get healthy and figure it out quickly because it's one thing to go in as a 2 seed. It's another thing, as we saw last year, if you have to go through Giannis and then go through if you have to go through Boston in the first round, because they play defense, they'll make you work. And then you have to go to Milwaukee. Say you squeak by Milwaukee in a grueling 7. Now you have to deal with Embiid backing your ass down in the playoffs, in the conference finals. So seeding will matter a little bit. I think Miami is the team that puts a scare in some contender, whether or not they beat them. I think there's a lot of dogs on that team with a lot of playoff experience, guys who have played well in the playoffs. I still lean Milwaukee. I think as of now, because of health, Giannis is the best player on the planet, both sides of the court. Kevin Durant has something to say about that when he gets back, but he's not back right now, so we don't know. I think it runs through Milwaukee. I think Philly, if Harden clicks, is there. I think Brooklyn, I hate to say this, the NBA title picture might again fall on if Kyrie Irving will get vaccinated. Right? Like, if you put him into the mix with him, Kevin Durant, and Ben Simmons, they account for all the offense Simmons does not contribute. Those are 2 dudes that can get you 50 in a playoff game.
And he accounts for all the defense they don't contribute.
And he accounts for all the defensive liabilities you attribute to Irving or Seth Curry. You have now somewhat of an eraser, or like I said earlier, somewhat of a Giannis body, someone to throw at him. So I think it gets interesting, but I would like everything in the NBA, it's going to come down to the best players. Giannis is going to be there at the end of the day. Kevin Durant will be there at the end of the day. We'll see what happens with Philly, James Harden, and Embiid. But Andrew, I agree. I think it's narrowed in a sense. I think those 6 teams that are all kind of within a game of each other, I think there are only really 3, maybe 4, depending on how you feel about Miami, who could actually get through. And then, as we saw last year, health is going to determine a whole lot of this stuff.
Yeah. I'll keep it short, but Milwaukee was the favorite before the trade. The Harden trade. They're going to be my favorite after the trade. I'm going to make some enemies here, but I don't trust Miami at all. I think they're a laughingstock of a 1 seed. Jimmy Butler's biggest career win was a practice scrimmage. I just don't trust them, even though they beat Boston in the bubble. But that was a Tyler Hero fluke game, so I'm not worried. Giannis. Just Giannis. You don't stop Giannis. Giannis stops everyone. Yeah. I don't think it's much more complicated than that.
All right.
I got one thing to add. The Serge Ibaka edition.
I love it.
We glossed over. Again, if you end up with an Embiid in a series, it's a body to throw at him, right? If you end up with Philly, it's someone to meet Ben Simmons and Kevin Durant, or not Philly. If you end up with Brooklyn, it's someone to meet some of their wings at the rim, right? So I think Ibaka, again, pick and pop. He can shoot, spread the floor, so you're not going to condense the court. You're still going to have Giannis at your 5. He gives you the ability to play big and keep your switchability and defensive versatility, which I think is huge. And then if you don't need him, you don't need him, right? He's a luxury, and that's a hell of a luxury to have, as we saw with the run with Toronto. And then just to kind of add to what Sam said, the thing about Milwaukee is they have a guy at every position to throw at your best player. You're not shutting down superstars. But if you get Steph Curry or Kyrie Irving in the playoffs, you have a Drew Holiday. That will wear you down. That will, regardless of whether their numbers are up, that will have impact. If you get a James Harden, if you get a Jimmy Butler, you have a Chris Middleton. Is he going to lock him up? No. Is he going to master scoring? No, but he mitigates the damage those positions can do. And then literally any human being that plays a front court position, you can throw Giannis Antetokounmpo at. And then if they get Brook Lopez, again, that's just another big body at the rim. He made an impact when Giannis went down last year. So I think the Bucks are the most talented team.
He didn't make an impact.
Team.
He scored 33 in a playoff game.
He got them to the finals, you can argue. Yeah. So, that's my point. I think DiVincenzo was a liability because, as we all are going to hate to hear, Grayson Allen can play basketball, despite being a dirty little prick.
Unfortunately.
But I think they're the most talented. I think they're deepest. I think they defend hellaciously. And if they're healthy, they won't cruise by any means at this point. They were looking like they were going to cruise through. I think these trades the other day make it much more of a drag-down, knockout, warfare type of playoffs, which we all are going to want to see. But I think Milwaukee gets through. And I think they ultimately win the championship. I don't think any team in the West has a front court player for Giannis. And as I just said, they have backcourt players to at least throw at stars.
All right. I think we should wrap it up there, take a quick break, and then we'll talk about the big Super Bowl coming up this weekend.
Sounds good to me. We've
Bengals and Rams.
Made a half an hour. I haven't talked about the biggest game in American sports.
All right. I think the Super Bowl is really interesting. I don't know about you guys. I feel like the buzz has not been as great as it would be if you had a Mahomes or Brady. That said, I think it's good for the health of the league to have a Super Bowl like this because you establish the Bengals as a team in the AFC that's a competitive team in addition to the Chiefs and the Bills or maybe the Chargers, right? Guys, teams with quarterbacks you think are going to be incredibly elite for years to come. I think the Rams, Stafford has been good this year, but McVay has coached around him. So I think to have two teams with quarterbacks where you see the limitations, right? They're either in Burrow's case he's young, or in Stafford's case he hasn't been in this spot before, and he doesn't make as good of an arm as he has. He doesn't make the best decision a lot of the time. So I think this is good for the health of the league. I think the Bengals. I think the Rams are a good match. Like they match up well with almost any team because they have so many good players just all across the field. That said, Cincinnati has 3 receivers. Where if any of them end up in single coverage, you feel like they're going to get open. I feel like the only weakness for Cincinnati offensively is the offensive line. It's a big one, right? If they gave up 9 sacks to Tennessee. If they give up half of that in this game, it's probably looking pretty bleak. I think their defense has been. They just shut down KC for an entire half of football, right? They did it, and they did it twice. And the Rams have Cooper Kupp, but outside of Cooper Kupp, is there anyone you're super scared of? I mean, Odell is Odell, but you're not super scared of that offense. I don't think overall. Mm-hmm. I think Cincinnati has. I think at the end, if it were to come down to the end of the game, and you're saying they're going to go they're each going to get one drive to score, I have way more confidence in Cincinnati than I do the Rams. I think that's a big testament to what Joe Burrow's done this year. I think it's less about Matt Stafford and more how they coach around Stafford. The way they coached that offense in the Bucs game, when they're up 27-3 and Cam Akers was fumbling all over the field, and if they had one drive in the middle of the third quarter where they score a touchdown, game's a wrap. They couldn't do it, and they ran the ball. I think there was a stretch like 11 out of 13 plays. So I think that's going to have to change in this game because they're going to have to keep up with Cincinnati's offense. So,
yeah, I guess 2 points off that. The first is looking at NFL big picture. I think it's great for the league because it shows that you don't have to tank for 5 years to be successful, right? Like the Bengals had a rebuild in a year and a half. This was oversimplifying it, but really 2 draft picks changed the entire outlook of that franchise. So I think hopefully going forward we see less tanking for Tua, who we know is not good, right? None of that malarkey. Second thing is more of a game prediction. I love Joe Burrow. I was amazed watching him in college. I maintain he had the best college season of anyone ever. But I think there comes a point when the team with the more blue chippers on their roster just wins the football game. I think the Rams attacking that Cincinnati front with Von Miller and arguably the best player in football, if you don't count Justin Tucker, I don't think there's anything they're really going to be able to do about it. Matthew Stafford proved that he belongs. He found Cooper Kupp when it mattered. Sean McVay trusted him when it mattered. I know there's a history there, but when it came down to it, he said, "Find your guy," and he did. I think that's just how it ends up, and I kind of hope they win, just because I know that Burrow's going to have a whole career to get himself into these positions, and Stafford's been rotting away in Detroit for the last decade and a half, so I think he deserves it.
I have a few things to say. First off, that Tucker comment should get you arrested. We were waiting for the comment to come, and that was it. Big picture, first off, Andrew, I actually disagree with you.
Really?
From this standpoint, I don't think it's a bad matchup by any means. But I think if you're the NFL and everything's about your bottom line, I think it's a fun Super Bowl. I think a lot of fans, I think we're in this group, we're not really emotionally invested in either team. I think it's fun. I think whoever wins, it's, oh, nice, so-and-so got a Super Bowl. Oh, man, Burrow's already done it, right? It's a little bit of that. But I think if you're the NFL, I think the Patriots' villainy drove ratings for a very long time. People tuned in to watch Tom Brady lose, or they tuned in to watch him win. Same thing with LeBron James. A lot of people tune in to watch that man lose basketball games, right? Mahomes, I think, is getting to the point where he's replacing that. I think we've had this discussion, not on the show, obviously, but previously just in discussion on who's going to kind of take over the villainy role. I think that in terms of the bottom line, in terms of ratings, this game would be better off with Mahomes in it, in the villainy of the Chiefs, and kind of the feel-good story in Stafford. Now, in terms of an actual football game, it feels a little Cincinnati. I think Cincinnati's overmatched. Now, I'll preface that by saying Tom Brady was overmatched for a long time in a lot of his Super Bowls, and he figured it out. Burrow has some of that in him, a little bit of Tom Brady, a little bit of maybe Deshaun Watson when he was at Clemson in terms of the ability to elevate in big games. But that being said, I think this is the worst possible X's and O's matchup for Cincinnati. Kansas City had nobody to throw at anybody on their offense. Chris Jones and Frank Clark. Frank Clark is so hit or miss. I wouldn't even consider him a guy you really look at. They were really rocking Chris Jones, who had been banged up, didn't really produce in that game. They didn't get pressure on Burrow. Despite that, since he struggled to score, they didn't roar back in any means. They let the Chiefs trip over themselves, and they just slowly took advantage of opportunities. I disagree with your point that they'll have to keep up with Cincy. I think if Cincinnati wins this game, it's another 27-24. I think LA could get high 30s quickly. I think maybe not high 30s, but I think they have the potential to outscore Cincinnati if it gets to a shootout. But I don't think it will for this reason. I think on the field, LA's defense, while it has some holes, granted a lot of those holes were exposed by Tom Brady, it matches up. Their strengths match up with Cincy's weaknesses, and then Cincy's greatest weakness matches up with an LA strength. So LA's greatest strength is you have probably the best player in football, probably the second best defensive player we've seen since Lawrence Taylor. We're talking about an NFL legend at this point in the prime of his career in Aaron Donald. You saw what Jeffrey Simmons did to the Bengals offensive line against the Titans. Not only do you have that, you have Greg Gaines next to him. That's another body. You have Leonard Floyd on the edge. And then the other person I really wanted to focus on is Von Miller. We've seen over and over again, he's one of these guys who elevates himself when he needs to. And they do not have somebody to throw at either of those guys. So I think the pressure mounts for Burrow. He's under duress. And then I have a question for you guys on how you want to handle this. You have two options, I think, if you're Cincinnati. You put Ramsey on Chase on an island, and then the rest of the defense, you play man-to-man, you play your zone, you play whatever. What I would personally do, and I am curious what you guys think, I put Ramsey on Higgins. Higgins cannot match up with Ramsey. He is exactly the type of receiver Ramsey dominates, and then you double Chase. You take Darius Williams, who's a good player, you throw Eric Weddle or whoever it is, Troy Hill, I think, over the top, and Chase will get catches here or there, but you'll largely be able to neutralize him. He wasn't a big factor against Kansas City. He got one goal line fade because they were dumb enough to put Chardavius Ward on him one-on-one. I think if they do that, Burrow's left with Boyd across the middle, he's a good player by all means. I don't think that'll amount to enough, and then Mixon out of the backfield. But Mixon may be forced to stay in and help protect for a lot of things.
I mean, Belichick's been doing it for years, right? You put your best corner on the number 2 receiver, assuming the number 2 receiver is worthy of doing it, and you double team the best guy, and that's been the strategy for years. It's worked for years, and I mean, you have Jalen Ramsey, so you know that's gonna work effectively. I think something underrated with Cincinnati is the second half adjustments they've made throughout the playoffs have been really good, like really good. I mean, that's why they won KC. They've been the first 2 rounds. I think with Cincinnati, they've been outmatched overall team-wise for 2 rounds now. Now, maybe not to the extent. I think the Rams roster is better than the Chiefs roster. I think it's definitely better than the Titans roster.
Yeah.
But I think the fact that they've been outmatched, right at the end of the first half, you're like, oh, they have not looked good, and they turned around the second half. I think that is real versus the Rams, who've done the opposite kind of, right? They almost blow it against Tampa. I mean, I thought the fourth quarter of the NFC title game was both coaches trying to give it away. I mean, McVay using all of his timeouts with, what was it, 10 minutes left?
10 minutes left, down.
I mean, right, if you don't have the Niners go Trent Williams in motion, run to the other side, and then punt on 4th and 2, right, we're talking about the Niners potentially in the Super Bowl. So I don't think McVay's been as sharp as you'd like it to be versus the Bengals coaching staff has been really good. And there's familiarity on both sides here, which, I mean, I think that would probably, based off the track record of the last few rounds, really help out the Bengals because they've shown they can make those second half adjustments and be really effective and win games because of it. I think that's an underrated part going into this game.
I will say this. I think the streak got broken in Week 17. And I agree with you. I think the reason that since he did it twice to Kansas City, they had given up over 20 points in the first half and then gave up 3 in both second halves. McVay generally does not lose games he leads at halftime. So you are putting a whole lot on the likelihood of something that doesn't typically happen to happen were you to be down early. I think they're really playing with fire. If Cincy starts slow, could they get away with it? Joe Burrow can get away with just about anything. He's one of the 4 or 5 guys that can do it. You're never dead. But if the Rams don't literally forget how to hold on to football, we're talking Pee-wee level football stuff, they absolutely roll that Tampa team. Stafford makes a couple errors early against the 49ers game. Against the 49ers, you're also playing a very good defense that's seen you 3 times. I don't take what I see in divisional playoff games, in terms of division teams playing each other, and project it forward very much. I think those you kind of have to take with a grain of salt on their own. But I don't disagree with your point that Cincinnati does tend to adjust very well. I just think that if anyone has the ability to counter that, so far in his career, it has been McVay.
Yeah.
So you guys are both taking the Rams.
I'm taking Rams 31-23.
Good teams win. Great teams cover. I think the Rams are a great team. I think they win 27-21.
I think the Bengals shock the world, I guess, apparently, based off the way you guys are talking. I think they win 30-27. I think they get a touchdown late. I think the Rams do, for the first, part of the game, they do go up. I think Cincinnati has the ability to close the game. I'm saying they're not going to go up big, but they go up a touchdown or something. I think Cincinnati's able to come back from that.
I'm going to change mine. Just the score. I'm going to go from 27-21 to 26-20. I don't think Evan McPherson misses. I think he gets a couple of field goals on that.
Okay. What are your prop bets?
Let's do prop bets.
Let's do prop bets.
All right, so you have 8.
So
you have to pick 3.
After 8 prop bets, I'm going to run through them all, and then we'll go back and we'll do me your locks.
Okay.
Everyone has to pick 3. I've already picked my 3.
Okay.
I don't want to contribute to biases.
All right, well, listen.
First of all, classic heads or tails. Even odds.
Do you want us to give answers here or just listen to them all?
It's probably best if we give answers.
I like giving answers.
Okay.
Heads wins on Madden, heads wins on the field. That's Kansas City, man.
Yep.
National anthem runtime. Our girl Mickey Guyton is going to be singing it.
I don't know who that is.
Oh,
I saw her on the Today Show once.
So the over/under is 96.5 seconds. Which is a minute 35.
Okay.
She averages between a minute 33 and a minute 37.
Overall day. They stretch those freaking things out in big games all the time. If she's that close, on average, when she's singing a freaking concert hall,
that means she's gone over.
She's stretching that thing for the Super Bowl.
My mindset is she goes under because when people get nervous, they rush.
I mean, when people get nervous, they just sing shitty. Freaking Fergie had a 15.
FCC violation.
No, shitty's not a bad word.
All right.
Point.
Third prop bet.
We'll talk to him later. Third, first commercial. Cars, tech, food, beer, non-alcoholic drink, or none of the above.
Oh, you gotta roll through them again.
Cars,
Yep.
tech, food, beer, non-alcoholic drink.
Cars.
Tech.
Okay.
I was thinking cars, but there's a lot of tech companies out there
There
now.
are a lot of tech companies.
Fourth one. How many times will Chris Collinsworth say, "Now here's a guy"? Over under 1.5.
Way over.
Over.
You can stretch that to 7.
Man, he might get that in the first quarter.
Oh, man. That's a real prop bet?
It's a Sam Posman prop bet.
Oh,
Okay. Were all the other ones real ones?
Sportsbook?
No.
Have you written all of them?
Yeah.
Oh. The national anthem one was good.
Yeah, that's not bad. You did the research on it, too.
How many references to neither Tom or Mahomes making it to the Super Bowl will we hear? Over under 1.5.
Way over.
Because you just need one for each.
I mean, there's another one in there. How many Tom Brady, Joe Burrow comparisons do we get in that game? And
That's
the
true.
answer's probably over 1.5 in that, too.
Does Al Michaels announce his retirement at the end of the game?
Is that a rumor?
Ooh, that is a rumor.
His contract is up after this game.
And he did an interview recently that made it seem like this could be it.
I'm going to go he does.
I think... Does he announce the retirement? I think it depends on the game. If it's a blowout, yes. If it's a blowout, because they have to fill the space.
But at one point, you don't want to take away from the moment of the players.
That's true. But let's say it's fourth.
I mean, if you're doing that Denver Seattle game from a decade ago, and you're like, "Hey man, what are you doing this weekend?" Like,
I'm going to the golf course.
I'm retiring.
Go ski with Colin. All right, second to last one. Will there be a missed kick? This was a lock for me. I said no.
Yes.
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 Super Bowl pressure.
Yes.
Matt Gay can't kick it 35 yards right now. Evan McPherson copyrighted a nickname before a Super Bowl.
Money Mac, to be specific.
It's not a good look.
That is a cocky, very cocky.
As much as we talk about how good
well.
he's been, he did have that kick against the Packers this year, where halfway through he starts celebrating and turns around. He's like, "What happened?"
No, not halfway. He saw it go and thought it went in.
Yep.
And I was like, "Oh wait, no, it didn't."
Okay, last one.
Okay.
And this is my personal favorite. Do either Collinsworth or Michaels attempt to say one of Joe Burrow's many nicknames at any point in the broadcast?
Oh, I would love a Joe Shiesty.
I think we're getting Joe Shiesty on the broadcast.
Joe Cool will come out.
That's what I'm scared.
I'm worried about Joe Cool.
Joe Cool will come out. They'll be like one of those Al, just Joe Cool up here.
I think all it takes is if they look at the crowd and someone's holding a Joe Shiesty sign, they're gonna make some sort of reference to the fact that that's the nickname going around for him.
If we get a Burrow last-second drive, do we hear the John Candy, Joe Montana story before the drive starts? For those of you who don't know, there's this legendary story of Joe Burrow playing the Bengals in the Super Bowl. They're down. He's going in for a game-winning touchdown. Walks into the huddle. Teammates are all tight. And he's like, hey, is that John Candy in the stands? Whoever the hell that guy is. And everyone kind of just relaxes.
Hey,
and
that's
they
the
go down
late,
and throw a
great
touchdown.
John Candy.
Who's John Candy?
You don't know John Candy?
No, who's John Candy?
Show you a
boy.
picture of him.
We're gonna have to. Oh boy. But
Anyway,
I think there's gonna be, if there's some sort of big moment, there's always one of those stories. There's the classic Patriots halftime versus the Falcons. This is gonna be one hell of a story.
Oh, that's embarrassing.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't know.
He was like one of
Spaceballs?
the big young celebrity deaths.
Spaceballs?
Yeah.
Oh man, this guy's a legend.
Come on now.
He's the dog, right?
Yeah.
Damn.
All right. I do think there's going to be some sort of story, regardless of
Barf.
if there's any sort of big moment. I mean, there was the McPherson one from the AFC title game, or AFC divisional or whatever.
What
Right.
prop
It
bets?
looks like we won the Super Bowl.
Yeah, that's like we're going. Oh yeah, it looks like we're going to the Super Bowl. Yeah.
No, but this game will be. It looks like we're winning the Super Bowl before he
Yeah.
misses a 37-yarder because he trademarked his
Money
name.
Mac.
Anything else to add?
I think this is good prop bets considering you wrote all of them. That was really
Yeah, those
impressive.
are hell of
Those
prop
good.
bets. Yeah.
All right, so I think let's end it off there.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to end it. Go Rams.
Go Bengals.
I just hope the characters make their kicks.
All right.
And
Justin Tucker. You
that,
can't.
and that Aaron
do-
Donald plays well enough but
Don't-
not great enough to
don't.
surpass.
He's not even the best kicker in the league anymore.
Father Chuck. That's just not true.
All right. Thank you guys so much for listening. We'll be back next week. We'll wrap up the Super Bowl, all the implications from that.
And the Celtics 11-game winning streak by that time.
Sure. All right. Thanks, guys, so much for
Thank
listening.
you.
Thank you guys so much for tuning into this edition of Courtside. We'll be back next week, wherever you get your podcasts. Please subscribe if you enjoyed. We really appreciate it. Leave a nice review or comment or a like. All that is greatly appreciated. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back next week.